Today I want to talk about my garage, my storage solutions, and my workshop. As most of us have, is a messy garage and lots of things going on and maybe not the best organization in our garage. But we got so bad, I'll show some pictures of it as I'm talking, that I just had so much in here. For a while I had an MG in here that was in pieces, and then after that, after the MG went out, I had a trailer in here for a while. So we could only park one car in here. Now, the way we're set up, I'm going to show you, it's still one car in this garage, but it does have the capability in bad weather. I can do a little rearranging and get two cars in here. We'll show you a picture of that. So when I designed this, I really had to look out for, one, be able to get one car in here and have plenty of room to operate in a shop. Two, to organize my shop so I could work in here efficiently and cleanly and quickly and safely. And then also, in a bad weather situation, is to be able to get two cars in here. We get hail around here sometimes, and so I'd like to be able to pull the other car in to make sure that I don't have any hail damage. So far, that's worked really good. I've been about 3 or 4 days where I've had to do that, and between snow and potential for hail, we haven't had any problems. So I've been worked out really well from that respect. So I think I'd like to start on the storage solutions. I think that's one thing. Most of us have a messy garage. And as I go through this, one of the things I wanted to point out was that you plan the best you can, but you can't plan on the future. And so in my case, I didn't have grandkids at the time I laid this out. When we had grandkids, and suddenly they're coming over and we have some big toys of theirs in the garage. So I don't really have a spot for some of those, and you'll see how we kind of have to make do with the space you have, because no matter what if you're working on a special project, you have a new hobby, you have kids or kids move out, any number of things can cause you to change your storage strategies. So that's what I found over time. So the best you can do is to design shelving, tool storage, access to different things the best you can, and deal with it as things change. So we'll start, I think, with the storage. So we'll start over here. So on this side of the garage is where our van would normally be parked. And so here I wanted to keep clutter, the garage floor pretty clear of clutter, and have things stacked up high and out of the way and neatly and safely, where they're not going to come tumbling down. So as we'll go around and take a closer look, but I wanted to show you, I've got a shelving unit that I purchased from work. It's a heavy duty file cabinet. If you can imagine one of your file cabinets full of paper, how much that weighs. Well, these drawers can handle that. So as far as putting fertilizer and dirt and pesticides and liquids and things like that, and safely store it away and keep it out of harm's way, these drawers have worked great. I have some heavy tools in there as well in these bottom two drawers. So this, if you can get hold of one of these, I only paid like $10 for it, but I doubt if you buy one new, they're several $100s, if not more. But that's worked out really well. So I incorporated that into my storage. It's one of my primary storage areas. Next to that, I've got things like soda, some loose items that I might use from time to time, some smaller tools, power tools. And that wraps around the corner, as you can see. Okay. If we move up to the top, you'll see I've got storage for things like camping. We used to go camping quite a bit, but I haven't gone camping in a while. But it's still nice to have these things. It's accessible. You need a step stool to get up there, but that works out pretty good. So you can have the big items like a tent or some of those big tubs, and just keeps things clean and secure. Moving on over here, I've got what I call my long handle tool storage, and I kind of made this area just a little different. So this is something, it's back against the wall, as you can see. There's plenty of room to pull the van in, and you can open up the door on the passenger side and get out and get in from that side of the garage as you pull the van in. So that's worked out really well as well. And the last area on this side, because I do a lot of home improvement projects and other little woodworking projects, I needed a space to put spare wood. So that was something when I first thought about how I wanted to lay out this garage, I kind of forgot about that. But as I was cleaning out the garage, I realized how much excess lumber and even some sheet goods that I had. So I needed a place to be able to put something 4 foot wide and 8 foot tall, just a standard 4x8 sheet of plywood. This is actually slightly larger than that. So I've got a tall ceiling. I'm not sure exactly how tall it is. I think it's over 9 feet, I think. But the idea being I can put pretty much anything in here and it stores very well. I did put a chain across the front so nothing would fall down. I think that's worked out well. And in addition, if I have some other long handle tools that I'm using in the meantime, I can throw those over there as well if they're more like a seasonal type tool, like a snow shovel or a pitchfork, something like that. So that pretty much wraps up this side. One thing for fun that I did, I don't know if you can see it, but I've got some lighting underneath the shelf here. And when you turn off all the lights, it looks kind of cool. So I'm not going to turn off the lights because it'll get too dark and you won't be able to see anything. But at night, it's a nice mood lighting. I don't turn it on too much, but just to kind of show people how nice that looks. It really showcases your tools that way. Again, on the top, you can see how I've got my storage up there. Everything is 3/4 inch ply, all my shelving. 2x4s for the most part. I've got one spot here for the long tools. It is a 2x6 because I had this longer spread, and it's probably overkill, but I just wanted to make sure I could put things up there without any problem. Now, one thing I wanted to point out is while I have this shelving and it comes out a couple feet, when I get to the garage door, you run into the track here. So what I did here is just make a little cutout for that plywood shelf to make it a little bit narrower, a little shallower of a shelf, and then it doesn't get in the way of the garage door. There's plenty of movement there. And there's still plenty of opportunity for storage, and plus it doesn't interfere with my sheet goods storage as well. So getting back to this unit here, it does have doors on it, so you can pretty much keep things out of view. Not that you need to keep them out of view, but it does kind of keep things out of the way and a little bit neater looking. Normally I keep this open, but if people are coming over or the kids are coming over, I can close this up, and it kind of visually keeps things out of curious eyes and hands. So the way I've organized this is I tend to have my pesticides on the top, as high as it'll go. I got a few different garden tools here and some garden chemicals here. I do have more garden chemicals, and we'll hit another spot over there. This is really nice because it does have a shelf that pulls out. This holds a ton of weight. You wouldn't think about it, but people put paper boxes and things like that. If you think about an office environment, you don't think about how tough this stuff is, but it holds a lot of weight. So it has several shelves. So I'm not sure exactly how this was, what that would have been for, maybe some kind of card system or something. But so for example, in here, I do have some more of my heavier garage tools. I don't know if you can see that or not, but it weighs quite a bit. And then at the bottom, I do have some more yard goods as far as hoses and dirt, some fertilizer, grass seed, things like that. And occasionally I'll have something like a grout filler or something that'll go in there. Again, it's something heavy, maybe dusty. I just want to keep it out of the way and safe from getting the bags popped open and things. So this works out really well. So again, the space in this bottom, I have the shelves all around as you've seen before, but underneath here, I've left that kind of open for some taller items. It's cluttered in here, but I think that's kind of part of life, is you're going to plan on things and things end up showing up in your garage or your life that you weren't planning on. Some of these, for example, I have a friend in a wheelchair, so I've got some ramps I made for him, and so those are accessible. And this is just a good place to store them. And also it's been a good, I'll show you this other little portable tool chest that I got that I use I use this as a platform for my spray painting and some of my projects. So that's worked out a double duty. Under here, I've also got, sometimes you may have like a sawhorse or something like that. I do have some chairs, but I've also got one of my portable sawhorses in one of those Workmate. I think it's a Black & Decker workbench under there as well. So it tucks up under there. It's easy to get to. It does take a little bit of, you have to move a couple of things to get to them. But if you're working on a project, it's worth pulling everything out, get the car out of the garage, set up your project with the tools you need and the workhorses, sawhorses, things like that you need, the platforms. And then when you're done with your project, put everything away. So I tend to work on things. I might be in here 2 weeks on a project and then not hit anything out in the garage for maybe a month or two, something like that. So I want things out of the way as I'm not using them. On the long handle tool wall here, I've got hooks on the wall. There's plenty of room to hang things. You never have enough room for anything, but I think I've tried to make it as efficient as possible, hanging things on these holders. One thing I think I'd recommend to anybody is I got one of these wall hanging shop vacs, and this has been a dream. I could probably use a slightly longer hose, but it's so handy to have this here. If you're going to clean out a car, you pull it in, you've got these hoses, you can vacuum it out. And what's double nice about this unit is it also is a blower. So it used to be I would either use my leaf blower, which is fine, but you'd have to get it down, get an extension cord, plug it in, and when you got done, take the extension cord, put it away, and hang this thing back up. But with this thing, you just hook the hose up. I mean, you still got to put that away, but it's so much handier, and it actually has a pretty good amount of blows enough air to really like blow leaves and twigs and dust out of here pretty rapidly. So this works out really well. So I've used this probably more as a blower than I do as a vacuum, but as a vacuum, it excels as well. So if you see something like this, like I said, I would recommend getting one of these shop vac type units for the wall. One more thing I wanted to mention about the sheet goods storage is I do have an old hollow core door here. It came from a closet, I believe. No, maybe this came from one of our doors. It's nice to have this where you can put this up out of the way, and when I'm working on a project, I get my sawhorses out. This becomes my workbench. Or my work surface for bigger projects. And then when I'm not using it, it's rather lightweight and it holds a fair amount of weight. But usually if I'm working on a project, it's not like I'm working on an engine block or anything. It's usually a woodworking project. So when I'm done with my project, it's easy for me to put this back over here, put my sawhorses away in this, whatever size door this is, that work surface is now safely out of the way and convenient to get to and put away. Moving on to the other side of the garage, this is the side that's usually does not have a car in it. But as we go through, you can see how it's still designed to have a car to be able to pull in here. And once we take a few things out, like the trash cans and some toys, if they happen to be in the way. So trash cans can go out in bad weather. That's not a big deal. But still, it's a very functional space. So this space is usually pretty open, except for things like the trash cans and maybe toys and things like that. So it's real easy for me to walk out here, fix something or work on a small project, even when the van's in here at all times. So it's pretty much an all-weather room as far as being able to get out here. I've got a pad on the floor. It keeps it fairly warm. I've got kerosene heaters. I've got radiant heaters, some other things. So in the winter, you know, if it's like, you know, several degrees below zero, you can warm this space up pretty good because I insulated it as I was doing all this work. So the first part over here is going to be my workbench. So it's kind of an L-shaped workbench. I've got some vices on there along with most of my hand tools, and I've tried to organize my tools in a way that if there's things I need, they're kind of in one spot. So my electrical's in one spot, my gardening stuff's in one spot, my woodworking's in one spot, mechanics tools are in one spot, you know, more or less. So there's going to be some overlap as you use different tools. But I try to keep things as organized as possible, and that basically stays over here. Lots going on here, but this was one place I really wanted to spend some time and think about what I was using the space for, how I've used my space in the past, what didn't work for me and what did work for me. And I learned a lot, obviously, if you saw those early pictures of how cluttered this garage was and what terrible shape it was in. I definitely couldn't keep going on like that because it just became tools were lost, things were just misplaced, and it was really hard to keep track of things. Plus the space was just bad. I didn't really have anywhere just to run out, do something, run back in, and here I do. And when I did this, I thought, when I first was going to shoot this video, I thought, well, I want to really clean up this garage and have it super clean and have nothing in here except the things that I planned on. But then I started thinking, well, that's not life. And I just kind of kept things. I took a couple things out just because I needed to put them away anyway. But I wanted to definitely show you this is real life. And this is kind of how I'm living my shop area now. And so all things are constantly moving around and being fixed and being moved around or pending to be fixed or whatever. But the point is I've got things where they belong and it makes things super easy. We'll move in on this side over here. This is mostly storage over here. I've got underneath the shelving unit here, I've got one of those long multi-plugs. It's like 4 feet long. I got that from Harbor Freight or whatever. So I've got that plug under there. I've got kind of a battery. I've got an old tool chest that I had for a long time. I took the top off and I like the fact it was metal. So what I did was put my battery chargers in here. And so that becomes like a battery charging station. So I can keep all the batteries, things like that that need to be recharged. I can keep all that right here. It's plugged in and handy. It's out of the way and I know exactly where it is. Another thing I wanted to do as I went through, I realized I could organize things in these drawers. Well, obviously you do anyway, but I've got a mechanics tool chest over here. So that's organized for mechanic tools, but I have other things as well. So you know, things like saw blades. So you may have them for 5 or 6 different saws in your shop. And sometimes it's hard to organize where do you put all that stuff. Well, anything with a blade, it could be an X-Acto knife or a circular saw, whatever it is. I don't have a lot of blades, extra blades sitting around, but everything like that I keep in this one drawer here. So I just know if I need a new saw blade, a jigsaw blade or a sawzall blade, it's in that drawer. So going on that same philosophy, I've got a drawer just for Dremel tools. So that's all my Dremel stuff's right there. So as I go around, you're going to see, you may be in a similar situation where you're just kind of a do-it-yourselfer and you have a lot of niche items. So in here, for example, I got things like drill bits and router bits. I've got some woodworking tools in here that would be specific to like chisels and some wood files. Automotive, I got things that are specific to automotive, like a spark plug gapper, a battery connector cleaner, you know, those very specific things for a car. construction framing. I've got my, breaker bar. I've got your line and your chalk and your drywall cutter and all those little tools, stud finder, all those little things you would use if you're doing some framing type work. Going through this even more, then I started going with these Harbor Freight bin systems. And this has worked out really well. Again, I tried to stay organized. And before I used to have those little drawers, those multi, and I had like a whole bunch of those. And those are okay, but you can't really see inside of them. And so I went with this system, and this has worked out real well. I think these you can get them on sale at Harbor Freight. They're not very much, but I got a bunch of them. And as you can see exactly what's in here without opening it up. I kind of went crazy with it, and so I built a little shelving unit for these, and that's worked out really good. So I've got large bolts and nuts and bolts and small screws, etc. And that's all organized in these bin systems here. And it makes it really quick to, if I know I just need a small screw for something or even a little nail, I've got that in this drawer right here. So the other thing I was thinking of when I was designing this was, how do I want my shelving units? I originally thought about having shelving units with doors. I thought that would be cool to have that, but then after I built these and started putting things in here, I realized if I've got other things going on, I may not want to open a door. That might be in the way. So it's handier just to have an open shelf like this to have easier access to everything. Because if you want something back in the corner and you're trying to open this up, and I've got some things hanging on this wall, and we'll look at those in just a second, but it might be hard to get some of those tools out of the edges of your shelves. So I just left that open. I put most of my hand power tools up in here. That's worked out pretty well. You can see it's easy access, easy to get to. I've got some of this other things I don't use quite as often up in this backspace. It's a little bit harder to get to, but it's accessible. My initial plan was to build like a little roof on this thing to keep it at an angle. And my thought was, don't ever store anything on top of your shelving unit like that. But realistically, it's a good space to store things. So that was kind of a silly thought on my part. So as you can see, I've got some longer things like a screen replacement, which is a little bit longer, but be kind of hard to store, but it's up here out of the way. I've actually got some spare fluorescent tubes, or these, whatever the new style tube is, stored up there. And I've got some other things that are just kind of up and out of the way. But moving on to the main part of the workbench, this is probably where I spend most of my time. I got a few hand tools here just that are convenient. A few kind of I call them kind of micro tools, like little picks and things like that that you kind of need quick access to just to work on some things. So I don't have a lot of tools underneath this area here. That's what I've got my tool chest for. So I try to keep most of those tools in the tool chest, like wrenches and bigger hammers, things like that. Just want to keep things convenient. So this shelving unit is about 7 inches deep. I wanted to keep that kind of more close to the wall and keep some of my automotive chemicals up here kind of out of the way. But I wanted a shelf here, but I didn't want to make it too deep because then it just starts taking too much room over your workspace. I put a LED light under here. I think that was like 20 bucks at Lowe's or Home Depot, whatever. But this has turned out to be a real nice workspace. So we'll look at our lighting in just a little bit here, but this workspace is in about 2.5 feet deep, something like that. But it's plenty wide to work on, plus it's an L shape, so I can put a lot of stuff here, and I've got these different types of clamps and stuff to be able to have access to those. Okay, underneath this workbench, I've got a few things going on here as well. I do have some storage for some sandpaper. For my sandpaper, I went with one of these type systems, because it's outside in the garage. I was a little worried about it picking up moisture, but it seems like putting in this little case here worked out pretty good. I do keep plumbing tools in here. I've got a router in here. One thing I thought, wasn't sure if it would work out. I've got this bin type work chest. And so some of the bigger hand tools that don't get used all the time are in here. And I was a little worried about them getting maybe a little bit too much moisture and getting some rust problems. But I've had this going for several years now and haven't had any problem with rust. So this has actually worked out pretty good. And that's just on casters. Rolls out of the way. On the other side, I put my compressor. Again, it's out of the way. I've got it piped into to a hose reel on the ceiling. We'll look at that in a bit. It's got its own circuit, so we don't have any problems with blowing circuit breakers or anything, which I did have a problem before. Getting back to the first side that we were just looking at underneath here is pretty much an open area. When you build an L-shaped cabinet or any kind of workbench, you're going to have a dead space. But that's worked out all right. I've got some extra shingles and some bags of concrete back there. Things I'm going to use them someday, but not right now. I've got my car ramps in there, some other long items. Actually, some of the plants that are stored for the winter, when I bring them into the garage, I can put them up in the space here and they don't get quite as cold. So there's a little bit of heat from the house. So when they talk about putting things in a cool area, it could be in your garage or whatever, it's kind of protects it from freezing solids. So I've had pretty good luck with keeping some plants. That's some banana plants right there that I'll plant in a few weeks here. This area too, on the back wall, I've used these for my clamps, for the bar clamps. I've had this little unit. I can store these back here. When I originally was going to do this, I was going to have these clamps on that long handled wall, but really I don't use it that often and it's super easy to grab them from here. But I've got just a few bar clamps that I use. Those are there. If I have any longer ones, I store them on the other side of my tool chest here. I've got a space that I can put some other really long things and keep them out of the way as well. Moving over a little bit further is my main tool chest. This is one of those Harbor Freight tool chests. Not the best at all. If I had to move this around a lot, I don't think I would have bought it. It's stationary here and has actually been very effective and has worked out well for me. I certainly recommend if you're just a hobbyist like me, but you do have, you're just full set of tools and everything. This works out really well. So again, I've labeled a few of these things: sockets and drivers, wrenches, pliers, snips, etc. And so I keep all that in here. I do have my electrical. I do a lot of electrical troubleshooting, soldering, stuff like that. And that's all my stuff is in here for that. So sometimes with some of these hobbies, it's hard to kind of figure out what do you do with your soldering iron. You might have like one soldering iron and where do you put it where it's not going to get lost or damaged somewhere. So that's nice having a drawer just for my handful of electrical items. One thing I did when I designed this is I knew I needed a new circuit specifically for the garage. So I wired this for an additional 40 amp circuit. So I ran one of those, I don't remember the size of the cable. I ran a cable from my basement. If you've seen my video on my studio in the basement, I talk about the circuit breaker box really briefly, or at least I pointed out. But I ran a cable from there to here. I calculated 120 feet. So I bought like 150 feet of this cable. And it turned out to be 119 feet is what I used. So I felt pretty good about that. So that's coming out of the studio, going up the wall further by our bedrooms in the house, coming down the length of the house, coming through. If you saw the access and how that was designed or how that had to run through there was, I was pretty pleased that I came up that close on my estimate for the wire. So that's a 40 amp circuit coming through here. I put this little box here to kind of box in the cable coming down, because I wasn't in the wall when I ran this. So I've got 5 breakers in there. I've got 4 circuits running in here. In the way I did my circuits, I'm getting off topic here a little bit, but I just wanted to mention this separate circuit that I've got out here. But I do have 4 circuits that I'm actively using. So one, for example, goes just for the compressor. One circuit is just for this side of the garage, which would basically be just the outlets on the side. One circuit is only for the lights above, and then the last circuit is only for that other wall, the first wall we looked at. So I've got not a lot on each circuit, but that was kind of my goal, was if I needed to work on something electrical, on something, say the ceiling lights or something, I've got plenty of electricity out here. With 40 amps coming out here, I got more than enough. I never use really that much. The big thing was the compressor, because when that would go on in the summer and I have a high velocity fan and I had some fluorescent lights and everything was on the same circuit. And if you had the dishwasher going in the house, boom, the circuit breaker would go off and, the garage would be dead and the dishwasher would be dead. So it was kind of silly to take all that through one circuit. But anyway, so now I don't have that problem. Now, in addition to this tool chest, I do want to mention, I use a lot of Harbor Freight stuff, and some stuff is hands down the best stuff you'd ever want to own. Some not so much, and some is terrible. So they really got the gamut of quality going on. But one thing I really liked, and has proven to be one of the best purchases I've made, is this little cart here. It holds a lot of weight. I don't know what it is. It has one drawer. I haven't really figured out the best use for it. Right now I'm using it for all my tools, safety glasses, and some things like that, so they're accessible. But this little thing I put one of those ramps that I talked about, my friend with the wheelchair, I used one of his ramps is a workspace on here. I just clamp it at the top here. And if I'm painting something, I can put the item on here. I can wheel it out to to the sidewalk, spray things outside, bring it back in here to dry out of the sun or out of the wind or whatever. So this has just worked out wonderful. So you can put a lot of heavy tools on here, put it up against the car or, whatever you need to be doing. But this has been a very handy tool. So that's one of the Harbor Freight thumbs up for me. So over here, as you can see, I've got more storage over here. So most of the shelving is shoved behind where the garage door rails are. I do have a spot, and we'll look at these closer, that sticks out just a little bit, but it sticks out even with the garage door. So as you back your car in to get it out of the weather, that space is still not interfering with getting a car in or out. This is worked out pretty good. We'll get into maybe a little bit more details as we get in here and show you what I've done there. This was a little bit weird because when I first did this, I knew I wanted to put my table saw underneath and out of the way, and that's worked out well. And I have an anvil, weighs a ton, and I wanted that kind of somewhere I could kind of scoot that around. So those definitely are out of the way. I thought originally I'd have enough room, and I actually built this high enough to scoot one of these big trash cans under to be out of the way in the corner there. The problem is now we've got two big bins. So one is the trash and one's a recycle. But I've got this, we went ahead and went with the bigger tub. So I think these trash tubs are just something you've got to figure out what you want to do with them. Some people store them outside. I don't necessarily like to do that. I think it looks bad. Plus, if the weather's bad, do you want to go out to take the trash out? I mean, it's like, it's nice to be able to come out here and just keep it in your garage. I do have some other chemicals on these shelves. So on these shelves, I got most of them kind of behind the garage rail where that runs. This one shelf in the middle, I built a little heavier duty. The reason being, we like to feed the birds, so we may have a couple of 50-pound bags of bird seed. You can see I've got a lot of charcoal in here, so this actually might fill up with some weight from time to time. So I wanted to make sure this was sufficiently. There's a lot of bracing on this shelf here, so that can hold a lot of weight. But then there's just other items, like I said, just general storage. I've got some storage way at the top that runs along between the wall and the rail as well. That's not very accessible, but it is what it is. It just gives you some extra space. So years ago, I tried doing one of those storage solutions where you'd have things hanging from the ceiling and you would store things over the cars, basically. That was not convenient at all. And I just never liked having this secondary wall hanging down over your head the whole time. And stuff just seemed like, it just didn't seem very secure. And to get things down, it was like too deep. If you had like a 4-foot wide shelf, the stuff in the middle was just hard to get to. And that's why just regular old shelves are the way to go. I do have something that's kind of for the oddball long stuff. And that's this shelf here. And it's kind of was a carryover from that older style I was using of storage. But I rebuilt the whole thing so it holds a fair amount of weight, and I can use that, put things like really long goods, like trim and stuff like that up there and keep it out of the way. And one thing I did want to mention quickly was when we have our grandkids and they spend quite a bit of time over here. My wife watches the kids during the day a lot of times, so those toys need to come out and be accessible. But those are also toys when they're not going to be here for a few days. It'd be nice to put them away somewhere. Actually, today when I was getting ready to shoot this video, I thought, where can I put these toys? So I figured out where I was going to be putting my trash can. Actually, there's a wagon back there. I've got one of these huge electric car things, and even their swings and stuff like that are stored in there. So actually that worked out pretty good. So as you can see, so my trash can doesn't go back very far, but it's still better than having this thing in the middle of the floor, and every time you try to put the trash away, you had to climb over that car. So I think I finally figured that one out. Okay, on the ceiling, I have a few things going on up here. I've got my hose reel for the air compressor. Electrical, actually, I'm using that now for my lighting, for my video light. I got a trouble light up here as well. So over the years, I think a lot of us have stored things over our garage. And when you think about it, I think some people put too much up there. And when I started looking at it, those are 2x4 joists running across there. They're not meant for very much weight. And this is not meant for storage above the garage. So I caution people, if you're thinking about putting that attic access door and storing a whole bunch of junk up there, just be careful about that. We're going to talk about that here next, because I think that's an important thing to consider when you're doing these. So before we actually get to the attic door, which we have, I'll show you how that system works. I want to create an area for shoes and things and coats. And so I kind of have this area, I call it the mud room. I mean, it's not a room, but it's just you know, this is the space right here. It comes out about 2.5 to 3 feet over on this side. But it's a space where you can hang. It's got some hooks here. I've got the plastic bag storage out here. We do have a small recycle bin. On this side, I've got some hooks for jackets primarily. I put a bench down here where you can sit on it, put your shoes on underneath, if you can see or not. But it's a slat. It's a grill basically, so you can put like wet shoes or whatever under there, and those will dry on that grill type shelves there. Put this on a cable system so I can actually pull this cable here and lock it there, and that's opened my door up there. So let's watch that. We'll close it back up. So I'm going to do that again so you can see how that door opens up there. So as you can see, the door's open. I can use my 6-foot ladder to stand on and access things right around that hole there. I'm not going to take you up there because it's just an attic with some Christmas decorations, and that's what I want to talk about. Is I've only got Christmas decorations and some Halloween stuff that's really lightweight stored up there. And I can basically, anything that's up there at this point, there's a few items stored that's pretty lightweight, that's kind of back on the far corners of the garage. Not much weight there. It's some old plastic Barbie stuff, and just not going to cause any problems with weight. But as far as active storage, it's only in this area right here where I can get to it just by grabbing it. If I need to get up there, obviously I can still use my extension ladder and climb up around there, no problem. I've got a light up there and everything. So you could store things up there, but I don't think it's a good idea. Anyway, so that's just a quick way to store your Christmas things and keep them out of the way. And putting that cable system on there really made this super, super easy to access. As far as my extension ladder is concerned, I put that up on the top here. I'll show you a quick video of that coming up and down, but that's been super keeping that out of the way. A lot of people have this system in their garages. I would recommend going with that because you can't get to it when the garage door is open, but close the garage door and you can get your step ladder or your extension ladder out. And that's worked out really well. So it's out of the way, it's safe, and it's easy for one person to get it up and down. One of the last things I wanted to mention was my sound system, basically what kind of tuner and stuff I'm using. I've got some small Dayton speakers from Parts Express. These have worked out really well. Keeping them up on top of this shelf here and out of the way. I've got again from Parts Express, a Les Pi amplifier up over here. And then I'm using basically my tablet as the source of music. So I just keep the tablet out here, easy to access. It's good for watching YouTube videos when you're working on the car or whatever. You can you can watch the how-to videos. And if you're just wanting to enjoy some music, you can do that as well.
There you go, folks. Another incentive to come out and hear Patrick Sweeney at Old Rock House.
So basically that's just the sounds, and it sounds pretty good. You can't really hear it over this microphones I'm using, but those little speakers are really nice if you haven't read about those or heard those before. Really cheap speakers, but they sound great, especially out in the garage. So they are small. I do have some big speakers I was thinking about putting out here, but I thought there was no reason to have really gigantic speakers out here when something like this is fine. I mean, they get loud enough for anything you're doing in the garage here. Obviously, we have a lot of value in your tools and some of the things you have out in your garage. One thing I had one of my security cameras left over, and when I upgraded the system, I actually attached one of my cameras here in the garage, and that's been kind of handy. So it's motion activated just like a normal surveillance camera, and that's in my normal surveillance system. But it's pretty nice to be able to, I'll be in my studio or whatever, and I can kind of just keep, if the door happens to be open, if the kids left it open, for one thing, I know the door is open, but I can also keep track of anybody that's maybe coming and going. So that was a tour of my garage and how I set it up. You may have some different ideas and some good suggestions for me. Perhaps you saw something I did that I could do better. If you got any ideas from what I've shown you, that's great. I really hope maybe some people got some ideas out of here. It's been a great space to work in. One of the things I did, if you notice, the walls look kind of nice. They are SX exterior paneling. The one wall was already insulated, so that was no problem with drywall and insulation and drywall, so I just covered those. On this other side, it was just studs and then the siding on the other, exposed siding basically. So that wall I did insulate and put that paneling over, in fact, even over the garage door itself. So everything is now insulated. The ceiling is not insulated, but I got to tell you, this space is super warm. It doesn't take that warm to heat it up. Obviously in the summer, then that would be, it's not as easy to cool the space off as it is to heat the space up. I do have high velocity fans, so in the summertime I can get some air blowing in here. It's not like it's an air conditioned space, and most of us don't have an air conditioned garage. So I've been really happy with this. I would recommend if you have a problem with your garage, this took probably several months, probably about 3 months to get through this whole project. It may have taken a little bit longer to get all the junk out of here. I had so much stuff, it was amazing. I did my home studio and then this project kind of back to back. And between the two areas, I was throwing trash out for a year. And I still, every now and then I'll come across something that was just left over from whatever. So it's worthwhile going through and throwing a lot of that junk out. Sometimes I hesitate to throw some things out because it's like, gosh, I'm going to need that someday. But if it's been sitting there for 10, 15 years, is it really something you're going to use someday? And I had to kind of do some soul searching and allow myself to discard some of these things. Once in a blue moon, I'll come across something. It's like, gosh, I wish I wouldn't have thrown that out. But there'd be no way you could predict what it was. If it was a little piece of metal or angle iron or something that you threw out. Usually the stuff I need is something that's cheap enough to go purchase anyway. But the return on my investment's been great. The space is super to work with. It's not in the house, because a lot of the projects I was working with, woodworking and things, I was actually doing in my basement where that studio is. And the dust and all that sort of thing and the paint fumes and stuff like that was not really an acceptable place to be doing those projects. Out here in the garage, no problem at all. It keeps it out of the house. It keeps the noise out of the house as well. Plenty of electricity out here, plenty of good lighting, plenty of space. So I would, like I said, I highly recommend anybody that's considering this, really figure out what you need in your life and how you're going to use it. So if you have any questions or if you have any suggestions, I'm open to suggestion as well. If you like this video, thumbs up. If you don't like it, thumbs down. And if you really like things, then maybe you can subscribe. So I'm going to hopefully continue to do videos like this and try to tell you some of the things I'm doing and learn from some of you all what you're doing, because I think we can all learn together. So thank you very much.